So today we are talking about Peter Do's debut collection at Helmut Lang. Now, as most of you know, or some of you might not, Peter Do was recently appointed as the creative director of Helmut Lang. Now, the thing about Helmut Lang is, ever since Helmut Lang himself left the brand, it's kind of been really dead, and they've tried to revive it a few times with a few different guest designers. I'm sure a lot of you remember when Shane Oliver was tapped to do a bit of work with Helmut Lang. There have been other designers that have been tapped, but it just never really worked. It just hasn't really, they haven't really been able to channel the same energy and the same, fanfare that they were able to channel from Helmut Lang himself when he was at the brand. Now, I think when I heard about the Peter Do appointment, to me, it makes a lot of sense. Peter Do is someone who, he worked under Phoebe Philo, and Phoebe Philo is heavily inspired by Helmut Lang. I've talked about this in past live streams. Maybe it's something I should make a video about. But Helmut Lang's philosophy was about building a cohesive wardrobe. A lot of his stuff was wearable, and it was all about developing these ideas season to season. That philosophy is also something that people like Rick Owens do, which is why Rick Owens doesn't do a complete 180 from season to season. It's just a slight development. That comes from Helmut Lang. But Helmut Lang, this is what makes Helmut Lang's work so difficult to describe. It wasn't just about building a cohesive wardrobe that you develop from season to season. It was also about looking at uniforms and seeing how he can develop it. So that's why you would see Helmut Lang looking at details of a military jacket and then changing tiny details of it to make it more aesthetically pleasing, or to actually make it more practical, or to make it more conducive to everyday wear, rather than something that's very specified. So that's where you get things like the Parker jackets. That's where you get the ballistic vest and stuff like that. And it's, Helmut Lang's work is very, very vast, even down to color. I see a lot of people saying that Helmut Lang had this and I was reading a lot of reviews where people said that Peter Do's aesthetic is very similar to Helmut Lang's black and white aesthetic, but that's not really all the way true, because Helmut Lang did use a lot of color at times. It wasn't just always khaki and black and gray and charcoal and white. It's not minimalist, which is something funny, but there are definitely parallels. There's definitely even individual pieces that you can contrast between Peter Do and Helmut Lang. Think of the vest. Peter Do has those vests that he does every single season. Helmut Lang used to develop lots of vests, and he used to play a lot with layering of vests. That was a very big idea in Helmut Lang's work. So it just, to me, it made complete sense. But what he actually does at the brand, long term, I think we'll just have to wait and see. But to go into the actual Helmut Lang runway show, there was a poem that was on the Helmut Lang Instagram, and this was a poem / piece of writing that was in collaboration with Ocean Vuong. If you guys don't know who Ocean Vuong is a well-known and quite famous Vietnamese poet. Now, I'm not really into poetry, so I didn't really understand how big Ocean Vuong was until I asked one of my friends who's really into poetry about, what do you think about Ocean Vuong? Is Ocean Vuong really influential? And she was like, yeah, Ocean Vuong is well-known. And what this poem was about was really about kind of the car being a safe space and a sense of comfort that Peter Do got from being inside cars. Now, this is obviously in relation to the fact that Peter Do was really focusing and hearkening on this idea of the taxi. Because if you guys don't know, Helmut Lang was one of the first brands, if not the first brand, to advertise using taxis. Now, why it was so provocative at the time was because luxury fashion, as most of you know, or just the world of high-end fashion, the kind of brands that show at Paris Fashion Week, they are so behind on everything, and they're so backwards in the way that they think, and they're very slow to adopt anything. So at the time, they thought that advertising on things like taxis was just seen as watering down your brand, because taxis are associated with the everyday person. Everyone takes taxis, and it's not seen as luxury. And obviously Helmut Lang did a whole taxi campaign, and it became big, and it was something that everyone was talking about. And what I do kind of find annoying in a way is the fact that every single designer that has been tapped to do something at Helmut Lang is they always go back to the taxi idea. And this is my first critique for this Peter Do Helmut Lang rollout, because as you can see, there's this advert campaign sort of thing where it's just the Helmut Lang taxi and the model walks in. Now, my issue is that we've seen this so many times. I think everyone knows about the Helmut Lang taxi at this point. Every single designer that has come back has tried to do this. And it's not, to me, when I think about brands, I think more about philosophy than actual individual pieces. So if I think of the reasoning why Helmut Lang actually did this is because it's different. It's quite revolutionary. It's quite provocative. So I think in the spirit of Helmut Lang, if you're going to do an ad campaign, I would have rather liked to have seen a campaign where Peter Do was advertising Helmut Lang in a very unconventional way. So don't just copy the taxi thing, because it's overdone, it's overused. We've seen it way too much. Too many people do it. I would have liked to see a weird campaign, a campaign on a place that you wouldn't expect it, in a way that you wouldn't expect it, because that is very Helmut Lang from a philosophy standpoint. And I think that's a more less obvious way of doing things than just doing the taxi, which every single person that does the Helmut Lang rollout does the exact same thing. Like the exact same way also, because there's only so many ways you can do it. But going back to the poem, so of course, because this taxi theme is very big in Peter Do's way of designing at Helmut Lang, he talks about how when he first immigrated to America and how he would wear seatbelts and he would feel this sense of safety. And it's also the fact that he would sneak out. And in interviews, he was talking about how he would sneak out and like take cabs and go to different parties and go to like gay clubs and stuff. And there's this like sense of rebelliousness that comes out of being able to be in cars and travel in cars. And that's also why in the Runway show, which we'll get to, we'll see like a lot of models with these straps around their bodies that are made to signify seatbelts. So yeah, I think that the poem was really sweet. We saw prints of the poem on a lot of the pieces, also on the floor, also all over the place. And the poem was being read out at the start of the show, which was also a very nice touch. I think Peter Do has a very homely vibe to it in everything that Peter Do does. And I like that Peter Do is bringing that touch to Helmut Lang. It's something that I've been enjoying personally. Let me just go through some of the comments. So many looks in there. I thought it could do with more editing, but I suppose it's very Peter Do to go big like that. Is it? I don't think Peter Do is like always going ostentatiously big. I don't think that's Peter Do's thing. I think Peter Do is more like on a low-key sort of vibe, personally. That's the vibe I've always gotten from Peter Do. But yeah, this is the Runway show. This is the taxi thing once again. I just feel like, not gonna lie, it's kind of overdone, it's overused. I would really like to see more designers being tapped at Helmut Lang doing very unusual taxi, because I think it waters down the reasoning for Helmut Lang doing it, and it just turns it into like a signifier that's not really that it's not really that significant when you remove the reasoning behind it. If you're just doing it because, well, Helmut Lang did this, so I'm going to do this, it's not really that inspirational, in my opinion. I'd like to see something different to that. Someone said it feels very generic. Yeah, that's my criticism for the taxi thing. It does feel very generic. Do did do that season where looks are presented as a matrix of the pieces to maximize the number. Oh yeah, I remember that. I think Do has a Gucci size show in him if he ever gets momentum. Really? Maybe. Yeah, with the tax campaign, you'll think that the brand's focus would be in contemporary corp wear. Yeah. So yeah, as you guys can see, this is one of literally the first look where we have sort of like the seatbelt motif and then kind of like the same seatbelt stripe going down the trousers. And they kind of look like marching band trousers. That's why a lot of people online were saying that it looks like it looks like Calvin Klein, Ras Simmons Calvin Klein, which I've made a long video on. So if you guys want to learn about Ras Simmons' time at Calvin Klein, I've literally made one video that explains everything that Ras Simmons did. Also, with the way that the text is printed, the fact that it's printed like that, like the poem phrases, big on the floor, that is a reference to Jenny Holzer, because Jenny Holzer obviously worked a lot with Helmut Lang in different campaigns, especially like the beauty and the perfume campaigns. And Jenny Holzer's work is really just about showing text in like large ways. And so it forces like the viewer to really interact with the text and also really to read the text. And just it's not really it's a cool idea, but it's not like super crazy or revolutionary. I get why Peter Do did it. I love the reference to it. But once again, I just feel like as a designer, I feel like I'm just saying it as if I was a designer. But if I was a designer and I went to Helmut Lang, I would study the philosophy of Helmut Lang and then not copy any of his ideas, but use the way he thinks and use his philosophy to create my ideas. So that's why I don't like very obvious, simple, overdone references like Jenny Holzer and the taxi stuff, because I think that there's more interesting stuff you can do. I'll be honest, I didn't like the magenta accents like at all. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I also like that one thing I do like that Peter Do did with this collection, Peter Do had this like shade of like pink slash, yeah, like pinkish shade. That was a color that Helmut Lang actually used across a few shows. So that was a nice touch. What I do like about this collaboration though with Ocean Vuong is that is very cool because Peter Do has managed to tie in using Ocean Vuong's text in a Jenny Holzer way, and the fact that Ocean Vuong is from Vietnam and Peter Do is from Vietnam, I love that touch because Peter Do's namesake brand, he talks about his heritage a lot. He harkens back to his heritage a lot, and he does, just shed a lot of light on Vietnamese culture, which I think is really good because I don't know too many prominent Vietnamese fashion brands or fashion brands that are run or owned or founded by Vietnamese designers. I do also like that there was a clear focus on tailoring in this collection because Peter Do, that's what Peter Do does, is tailoring. And I also like that there are a lot of denim looks because denim is Helmut Lang 101. Like anyone that's into Helmut Lang is obsessed with the denim because one, it was made well, two, it would last long, three, it fits nice. And so you would have people that would just have like the one Helmut Lang piece of denim that they've had for like 10 years. And they talk about how much they love the denim. Like a lot of Helmut Lang stands always talk about the denim. And so many designers copied the silhouette from like YouTuber type brands like Vuja Day all the way to designers like Phoebe Philo, like I said earlier. So yeah. Will you be doing a video on who you think could take the McQueen helm? Malala recently expressed that she would take over McQueen. Oh, maybe I should talk about that. That's a good thing to bring up because, yeah, Malala did talk about the McQueen thing, even though she had a few blunders with that last show, but we won't get into that because today is Peter Do Helmut Lang Day. But yeah, it was very interesting. What do you guys think about the show, by the way, now that we're watching it? Because once again, there wasn't really that much to the show other than reissuing like a lot of Helmut Langisms. Like, for example, the tucked in shirt into the denim is something that Helmut Lang used to do. So Peter Do did it. We've talked about the seatbelts. it's that, like I said, there wasn't really much to the collection to really talk about, if I'm going to be very, very honest. Other than the fact that I just think that Peter Do should do less of the like just damn right, let me not say copies, but as close to copies of old Helmut Lang as you can get, and more so looking at the philosophy of Helmut, but really, really making it Peter Do's own. Because I love Peter Do. So I'd love to see Peter Do make Helmut Lang his own, but use Helmut Lang's philosophy. I think that, yeah, the collection, in my personal opinion, which is obviously just my opinion, it's not fact. I thought that Peter Do could do a lot with this collection. I think that in a lot of ways, it was slightly underwhelming, but I don't think it being underwhelming was necessarily a bad thing because it's a first collection. And like I was saying earlier in the live stream, you can't actually win with the first collection because if you go too hard and you do too much, people will say you're doing too much. And then if you don't do enough, and if it's like basic like this, and when I say basic, I don't mean it's like entirely basic, but I mean in terms of like most fashion people can just look and be like, oh yeah, that's just old Helmut Lang rehashed with a few Peter Doisms mixed in with it. But you can't win with that either because people will say kind of what I just said, which is like it was slightly underwhelming because there was not enough using Helmut Lang's philosophy to do things that really make us think. It was really like, oh yeah, Helmut Lang used to tuck in shirts into denim. That's really interesting. There are a lot of denim looks because Helmut Lang was known for making denim pieces. There are prints on shirts because it's a reference to Jenny Holzer, which was literally the most famous Helmut Lang campaigns. So that's kind of my verdict on the whole collection. Could the designers be contractually obligated to use the taxi in this way? I don't think so. I personally don't think so. This is also a big thing I wanted to mention, actually. The way the show was shot did the work a disservice. I 100% agree. I 100% agree. Because this, it being shot from the top and us just reading the text, to me, is just like you can't even see the clothes, really. You're just looking at the text. You can barely see the clothes. And once again, the kind of people that would analyze the show and would really talk about it are here for the clothes, not necessarily for the text, because we can read the text on their Instagram page, literally. And we can read the text so many other places. And we could read it from an Instagram post or whatever with one picture from the top view. We don't need like a whole camera angle just looking at it from the top. Unless, of course, what Peter Do wanted to do was properly channel Jenny Holzer by really forcing us to look at the big text from that angle. But I think if Peter Do wanted to achieve that by the way it's filmed, I think we only need that cut once. We don't need that cut multiple times. Mike said the collection feels very safe. Yeah, it does feel very safe. But once again, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because it's a first collection, you know? I felt like he was being careful. Like he may have a lot to say, seeing as Helmut is a big inspiration on his own work. Yeah, I was reading some Peter Do interviews where Peter Do was talking about, I think he had some white denim from Helmut Lang that he's had for like years. Because I think he said that he discovered Helmut Lang from like Tumblr days. And that's how he discovered Helmut Lang. And then he got really into Helmut Lang's work, which obviously it says a lot because you look at Peter Do's work and you do see a lot of Helmut Lang influences, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it goes back to the Yohji Yamamoto quote, where Yohji Yamamoto said, like, copy, copy, copy until you find your own language. A lot of people misinterpret what Yohji Yamamoto was trying to say. Not that I know Yohji personally, but what I think Yohji meant by that was a lot of times you'll be inspired by a designer and you might take an idea from that designer, but because you are inherently two different people, the way you use it will inherently not be the same. Like Peter Do loves tailoring, but also looks at Vietnamese references and also likes wider silhouettes than Helmut Lang ever did. And so those differences mixed in with a Helmut Lang philosophy will always produce a product that is inherently different to Helmut Lang. So when I say because I've seen this in the past where I say, oh, this person is heavily inspired by so and so, and people that love that designer get offended and start defending the designer, like I'm saying they're copying the designer. Being inspired by a designer does not mean I'm saying that they copy that designer. It just means that it's a very big reference in their work. But he's taken Helmut Lang and taken other influences and turned that into a Peter Do language. So yeah, it's not a bad thing that Peter Do's work is heavily inspired by Helmut. None of the ideas are enticing enough for me to even care. The seatbelt straps are dated and heavy-handed. The colors he chose to accent with are low-key tacky. Interesting. That's a harsh way to say it, but it is kind of true. Like, I kind of said it was kind of underwhelming, which I guess encapsulates exactly what you're saying. And I've explained why I think that. But once again, it's the first collection. It is what it is. Do you think by collection 2 or 3, he's going to find his footing and be comfortable? I hope so, personally. I personally hope so. Because I just, like, Peter Do is an amazing designer, and what Peter Do does at his namesake brand is really good. And so I just think if you're going to do Helmut Lang, especially because we know that Peter Do has respect for Helmut Lang, we know that Peter Do loves Helmut Lang, I just think there's more to be done, and there's more interesting stuff to do at Helmut Lang. It was a good starter. And one thing I will say, actually, in Peter Do's defense, which a lot of people don't mention, and a lot of people that kind of critique shows and stuff forget that, like, fashion is a business, ultimately. And when we think about it, Helmut Lang has to sell, one, and a lot of people were saying that this collection would sell, and I definitely agree with that standpoint. It's something that I think if you're a Helmut Lang fan and you've been looking for Helmut Lang denim at a price that's not insane because you're not buying it from like Grailed where people are just like overinflating the prices, those are definitely the customers that will flock to this collection. So I think it will do well financially. And I think that that's also a consideration when you're making a first collection because you have to reintroduce a new audience to these brands. Like something I've started to realize about fashion is when I was younger and I was into fashion, no one cared. Like fashion wasn't as sexy and as mainstream as it is now. Whereas now, I feel like so many guys are into fashion, so many women are into fashion, so many just people in general are into fashion. And I think for that reason, a lot of people are just being introduced to these brands. So I think there's still a massive majority of people that probably never knew who Helmut Lang was, never heard of him until like this whole collection. And you're kind of having to bring these consumers along because it's very hard to, you know, convince these consumers to buy Helmut Lang against all the other brands that are producing clothes, of which there are so many. And these kind of consumers, I was having this conversation with a friend yesterday, actually. We had a really interesting conversation about the reasons why people buy luxury. And this person was telling me that essentially they have like someone that can afford like all this luxury stuff, and they were telling this person about a certain piece that they liked, and they're like, oh, there's this really cool piece, you should definitely check it out. And this person didn't just understand it, and because they didn't understand it, they're like, I don't really get it, I don't really understand it. But then I think 2 years later, that exact piece became really popular, and then said person bought it. And this person that we're talking about is like someone that can afford a lot of luxury fashion, someone that would be the ideal consumer for a lot of these brands. And so that's what you have to contend with. Like, they're not trying to convince people like us. We already love these brands. We already love fashion. We buy fashion that we like. Most of the people that would watch this channel, they look at fashion from an individual standpoint. They want to dress the way they want to dress. They buy things that they genuinely like. But the majority of people, especially the people with the money that can afford these brands, actually just want to fit into a clique. And so most of these things, they won't actually buy it until they see celebrities wearing it and see a proper rollout and see how it looks on other people and see that it's widely adopted. And these are very difficult, you know, things that you have to contest with when you run these brands. It's very complicated. It's more than just having a show that appeals to the fashionistas. It is a business and you have to sell. Otherwise, you're gone. So that's one thing in Peter Do's defense I think a lot of people don't focus on a lot. And that's why I won't really critique that hard about the show being underwhelming, because it is the first collection and you're trying to really introduce a new consumer base to what Helmut Lang is. I'd prefer Peter that actually would be doing fashion for his own brand and really go hard. Maybe brands need to close after the master is gone. Well, kind of like in the spirit of Helmut Lang. Sorry, not in the spirit of Helmut Lang. In the spirit of Alexander McQueen and in the spirit of a lot of designers, fashion is a hard business. It costs a lot of money to do. And I can imagine that Peter Do needs the money to put back into his own brand, like the money he's getting from Helmut Lang. So that, in my opinion, is why it makes sense for Peter Do to go to Helmut Lang. And I think actually the money that Peter Do gets from Helmut Lang will actually bode well in terms of, you know, actually being a reason why he can improve his own namesake brand. And I heard from somewhere, I can't remember where, that apparently Peter Do is like under a few financial issues as well. But don't take it's just something I heard, so don't take it as fact. But if that's the case, then it makes even more sense why Peter Do would need that money from Helmut Lang. Like I said, fashion, like a lot of people ask me why I don't want to be, why I'm not a fashion designer, because I have so many opinions on fashion. I've talked about a lot of ideas I've had to design things. And I definitely think in the future I will do a few capsule collections. But to run a brand is hard. Like, I think we always see all these success stories. And so that's why we think that fashion is like something lucrative. But most people are struggling designers and their brand is one season away from completely shutting down. It's not an easy business at all. I would rather run my magazine and be a journalist and earn less money, but at least love my job and be content and not deal with the stresses that fashion designers have to deal with, because it's not a joke. On the screen, I've put like some of the Peter Do-isms on the screen. There's this sort of like shoulder cutout that Peter Do does every season, and he brought the idea to Helmut Lang. And obviously, Helmut Lang is known for like the vests as well, so it kind of ties in, and that's why I said that Peter Do is a good fit for Helmut Lang, because there's a lot of stuff that Peter Do does that can harken back into the Helmut Lang language. I think the price point is the greatest factor into why a lot stray away from luxury / high-end fashion. People say I could just get the same thing from Uniqlo, but don't understand the artistry. I mean, to be honest, you can't just get the same thing from Uniqlo. I get that sentiment. There is a group of people that think everything that high fashion brands do, you can get. And that definitely is the case for like the bigger brands in terms of like the Louis Vuittons and the Hermeses and stuff. There's a lot of stuff that they do that you could just get anywhere. But if I want very, very long, very, very wide trousers, there is no department store that I can personally go to, and trust me, I've tried, that I could find those kind of trousers, which is why I have to go to like Random Identities or Rick Owens for that. So there are definitely things that you can't just get from Uniqlo or just from so-and-so brand, especially because I'm tall. So because I'm like 6'2", and not only am I 6'2", my proportions are messed up. So I have my torso, like the distance from here to the bottom of my torso is really short, like really, really short. Like it's not normal. And then I have extremely long legs. So my inseam length is 36 inches. So Uniqlo don't do trousers that are long enough for my legs. Like any department store, any like fast fashion brand, even if I was to buy fast fashion, which I don't, they don't even make trousers long enough for someone like me. But Rick Owens does, and Ante Minimalist does, and Yohji Yamamoto does, and Random Identities do. So that's also why these brands are some of my favorite brands, because they actually make clothes that I can fit in. So yeah. But bro, if you buy it from Lang, you're literally getting it from Uniqlo. True, true. In terms of like, because the company that owns Helmut Lang, yes, that is true, which is kind of funny. But you can't get the same shapes and silhouettes that you can in Uniqlo. Like, I get what people are trying to say, but not really. The fashion industry is heavily based around nepotism anyway. Yeah, it's always been like that. Okay, daddy long legs, love that for you. I don't love it. I don't like having to spend excessive amounts of money just to like fit in clothes. Um, I'd prefer if my proportions were normal and I had like 34, because the messed up thing about having a 36 inseam length is most brands actually stop at around 34 or sometimes, but rarely 35. So I'm just at that point where I just miss out, which is really annoying. Like if I was like 40 inches inseam, it'll be like, okay, fair enough, I'm far away. But like every time I'm just like, let me just try again. And I wear like 34, 35 inseam trousers. They're just too short. It's so annoying. And then I look under to see if like the trousers can be extended, but there isn't any fabric that I can like, there aren't any seams that I can cut to like pull out the fabric and extend the trousers. Really, really annoying. There are a lot of brands you can't get similar stuff anywhere else. Rick, CDG, Yoji, Headminer, some of the Tom Brown had it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The Nigerian build. I don't know if that is the Nigerian build. The Nigerian men just have short torsos and long legs. Is that a thing? Fashion is already super subjective. You need to take a step back and humanize our thoughts. People going wild calling it a failure. Imagine going to a job and you're expected to impact within months. Yeah, exactly. Which is why I'm saying, like, whatever we think of the collection, I've talked about obviously the business implications. It is a first collection. There's so many things that you have to achieve through a first collection. It's like unreal. Um, and so I just think it is kind of like insane to just think that Peter Doe is just gonna satisfy everyone's needs all in one collection, all at once. Um, I think my critique was more kind of what I want to see in the future from Peter Doe in terms of using Helmut Lang's philosophy in way more interesting ways than ways that we haven't seen every single designer that tries to revive the brand do, if that makes sense. Someone said there's a couple brands in the middle range that do 36 inseam, that do long inseams if you want sweat every day, green, black points, but that depends on your style. What brands are those? Definitely put me on. Definitely put me on. I mean, Random Identities is actually not super, super expensive. It's not like undercover Balenciaga expensive. It's like somewhere in the middle. It's not Yoji expensive. It's not even as expensive as Armista. I got a whole suit from Random Identities for I think like $400, and like I've gotten Random Identities trousers for like $100, $150. So it's not like insane prices. So that's why Random Identities is like the brand I always flock to if I need like something not crazy, but something that fits nicely. Phil Peter Doe is not comfortable using color, but needed to differentiate his helmet work from his own brand using it. But his use of color lacked nuance and made the clothes look underwhelming because of it. Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Next collection, Peter Doe should bring back Kristen Owen to open. She's a Canadian model that was Helmut Lang's muse. Yeah. That's a good point, actually. Although, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I think in general, though, because I think the casting of the show, of Peter Doe's show, was very much Helmut Langish. Like Helmut Lang likes a very specific type of model, the like skinny, sort of dark, grungy looking. I feel like actually, what's his name? How did he just skip my mind? Adi Slimon. Adi Slimon. I think that a lot of the reason why he casts the type of models he does might be because of Helmut Lang, because they kind of like the like really, I know it's kind of weird that they have those references. Also, the reason why I wanted to put this collection that you're seeing, this Helmut Lang collection that I put on the screen, is because this is where the inspiration of Peter Doe's, like, you know, the strap across the coat comes from. That's kind of what Peter Doe was referencing. I just remembered I just like played the Runway show and didn't actually provide context to why I was actually playing it. But yeah, that's why I put the show on. This show was pedestrian. Peter Doe cannot revive Helmut. I think you need to give him more time, and before we make like a complete verdict on if Peter Doe can revive Helmut Lang or not. But I just think that there is definitely space to do things that are way more interesting, personally. I've noticed a lot of designers relying on the model comeback for a moment this week. Yeah, I think in a few recent shows, actually, a lot of brands have been doing sort of like the model comeback. Didn't Versace do that really recently? They brought back all the supermodels from like the 90s in a show. A lot of brands do it. It is slightly overplayed, but it's still kind of like it's a nice touch, to be fair. It is a nice touch. And going back to reintroducing a new audience to these brands, I think it's really important in terms of that aspect. Because once again, I know the people that follow this channel, we talk about fashion, even the fact that you are watching a long ass live stream about Helmut Lang and Peter Doe means you have to be into fashion. But the average person, they don't know these things. So when you use these models, it gets them to really understand and then look into these things that have happened. So I think that's why it's important from a brand perspective to like drag these people along and kind of reel them in. Someone said Bleeding Indigo has 36-inch inseams. Really? I didn't know that. I'm definitely going to check them out. I did think that he caught a lot of the house codes. Yeah, so we talked about this earlier, but I guess what I said was that there's house codes in terms of like what Helmut Lang did. So, like, what did Helmut Lang do? Helmut Lang used a lot of denim. Helmut Lang focused on tailoring, but also Helmut Lang's clothing was commercial, like not commercial in a bad way, like commercial in a way that Helmut Lang actually did want to see his clothes on people to be worn, kind of like what Yoji says. It's not a gimmick. Also, Helmut Lang developed ideas season to season. So seasons wouldn't be drastically different. There would be slight changes. Maybe the vest, it sits further back, or it sits further forward on the shoulders, or there's an extra pocket, or a few more buttons on a blazer. That was Helmut Lang's way of doing things. And so in the spirit of Helmut Lang, you can't really judge Peter Doe one collection because Helmut Lang's thing was all about development, low key. So there's that. Yes, he tapped into that. Yes, he tapped into the Jenny Holzer references. I get it. Yes, he's used the taxi reference. I get it. But it's just really just doing exactly what Helmut Lang did. Like I said earlier, for people that are just coming in, I would rather like to see Peter Doe take that philosophy of what Helmut Lang did, think about the reason why Helmut Lang did it, and then take that idea and do it in a Peter Doe way. And that's why I was saying earlier that instead of having a campaign about taxis, which everyone in fashion understands that that's what Helmut Lang did, and it was very provocative and revolutionary at the time, use the idea and advertise in a very unconventional way. Don't just copy the taxi thing. And I think in terms of like the Peter Doe's use of house codes, Helmut Lang's house codes in this first collection, it was very much along those lines of just doing exactly what Helmut Lang did, rather than taking a philosophy and then making it more Peter Doe-ish, if that makes sense. Did someone say they need Demna? No. No. Helmut Lang does not need Demna, and I love Demna, but no. Just no. I feel like Takahiro Miyashita is the designer Helmut deserves. Even though Peter is the right man for the job, his choices seem too vanilla for Helmut Lang. I can understand that. I mean, the issue with brands like, because the soloist is so dark, and I feel like Helmut Lang was not just dark like that in that way. Helmut Lang went in a bit more different directions. And so I feel like if Miyashita goes to Helmut Lang, it's just going to be like dark, grungy Helmut Lang, which is, there's a lot of Helmut Lang's archives that you can tap into if you're doing that. But it's not, I don't think it's going to be a very holistic approach to what Helmut Lang is. It's going to be one aspect of what Helmut Lang did, and it's going to focus on one aspect of what Helmut Lang did. But I think it's definitely a great suggestion. I would definitely prefer that to like what people are saying about Demna going to Helmut Lang. Hell no. Do you know what I would love to see at who I'd love to see at Helmut Lang, actually? I'd love to see Raf Simons at Helmut Lang, because he's already so inspired by Helmut Lang and has already done so many things that Helmut Lang did. So I think it would just work. Because even the Helmut Lang collections that were kind of like a look on youth culture, and there's that famous Raf Simons show, I'm forgetting the exact year, where it was all about youth culture and he used really, really young models. And they were wearing like sleeveless vests and stuff. That is like the ultimate Helmut Lang copy that Raf Simons did. But even at like Calvin Klein, Raf Simons, that was very Helmut Lang. So it's only right. He just might as well just go to the brand at this point. Just go to Helmut Lang. Someone said, I'd love to see Raf Simons at Raf Simons. Well, that's not going to happen anymore, is it? They don't have enough money for Raf. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Because my word, Raf Simons' salaries, good lord. If I could pick anyone for Helmut Lang, it would be Glenn Martins. Oh, that's a really good suggestion. I love Peter, but it feels a bit surface level. I think he's always going to be stronger at his own label. Yeah, that is amazing. Because, so the thing about Glenn Martins, from studying Glenn Martins, and when I was in Antwerp, I actually got to see a lot of his like graduate work, which by the way was sensational. The thing I love about Glenn Martins is he's very adaptable, because we've seen Glenn Martins at Diesel, which is very different to what Glenn Martins does at Y Project, which was very different to what Glenn Martins did when he was a guest designer at Jean Paul Gaultier, Haute Couture. I think Glenn Martins has a lot of range. Glenn Martins can work at almost any brand and it would work, because Glenn Martins thinks outside of the box. And when he does use house codes, he uses them in an interesting way. So like when he did the Jean Paul Gaultier collection, he was using Jean Paul Gaultier's like house codes, but in a very, very interesting way, and in a way less obvious way than Peter Do did this first collection at Helmut Lang. So actually, I think that is probably the best suggestion I've actually seen so far in terms of Glenn Martins being at Helmut Lang. But then again, I think Glenn Martins is already like his plate is full at Diesel and Y Project. Raf would have just done Calvin Klein there. That's hilarious. I mean, Raf was already doing Calvin Klein / Helmut Lang for Calvin Klein. So yeah, it is what it is. When I made the initial video, when I was talking about I was reviewing Raf Simons' time at Calvin Klein, and you guys can watch that video if you want to. I tried my best not to mention Helmut Lang, because I knew it would make people mad, because Raf Simons stands, or just stands of brands in general. I feel like in fashion, people have like really, 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 really toxic brand loyalty, and I don't get why, because I think there's so many different designers that bring so many interesting things to the table. I just don't understand why people are so loyal to like specific designers. Like they're not your dads. they're not paying you to like defend them. And Ras Simmons has those kind of cult followings where if you say, yeah, Ras Simmons actually does copy Helmut Lang a bit, they will get so mad. They will get crazy in the comments. And I just don't understand why. Because one, it's fact. And two, just someone, once again, like I said earlier, someone being heavily influenced by a designer or copying someone's ideas does not mean that they don't have their own design language, or it doesn't take away from the stuff that they do. Like Ras Simmons has so many ideas that are unique and his own, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he took a lot of Helmut Lang's ideas. It just is what it is. It's just fact. Yeah, toxic brand loyalty is a thing. Because, for example, my favorite designer is Ardu Lamista. I'm wearing Ardu Lamista now. If I think of what designer do I have, like this one designer I have the most pieces of, it's obviously Ardu Lamista in my wardrobe. That being said, I critique Ardu Lamista all the time. All the damn time. Because it's just like, it's just a brand at the end of the day. Like, okay, cool. I love Angelina Misto as a designer, but she's not my mum. Like, if the brand does something I don't like, I will say it. They're not paying me. Like, I don't understand why people are so loyal to like brands and defend it, even when like they're clearly in the wrong, or whatever they're defending it against is just clearly fact. It's so strange. That kind of happens with like Rick Owens as well. Where you critique Rick Owens and you say, yeah, Rick Owens is like inspired by Helmut Lang also. And Rick Owens took a lot of ideas from Madeleine Vionnet. And like, people just start going crazy every time I say that. It's so funny. People start cults around rich people. Exactly. This is another thing. Like, I don't have a lot of money, and like I'm still trying to build my career. So why would I I don't get it. Like, why would I like bend my back over defending like some like rich person that has like no like actual like serious issues? Like, oh my god, how am I going to pay my bills next month? It's just strange. It's really weird. The cults that are around certain brands, I just find it really strange. And like I said, because there's so many designers, and in each era that are interesting. Like now we have designers like Demna and Glenn Martins and Peter Doe and stuff. And generations before you had McQueen and John Galliano and stuff. And before you had Yoji and Ray Kawakubo. And then before you had Scaparelli and Chanel. Like there's so many designers that do so many different things. And even they fit into a different part of fashion. Like if you think of Oswald Boateng and what Oswald Boateng in terms of developing and pushing men's tailoring forward, which is a totally different thing to like what a Vivienne Westwood would do with punk. And so I don't understand this idea of just liking one aesthetic, one designer. You think that what one person did is more relevant or more influential than another person. Because one, you can't even quantify that. So why not just appreciate everyone for all the different things that they brought to the table? Maybe that's just my journalism mind speaking. Maybe that's just because I think that way, which I think is a very like journalistic way of thinking. But what do you guys think about that conversation? Oswald at Boateng as Givenchy was too short-lived. Yeah, it was too short-lived. And I feel like Oswald Boateng's time at Givenchy is actually really forgotten because of how short-lived it was. People like that tend to not be researched. Yeah, true. Because Oswald, I am planning to make a video on Oswald Boateng soon because he's so revolutionary in terms of fashion. Like first of all, let me just tell you about Oswald. I know this is supposed to be about Peter and Helmut Lang, but it's all relevant because we're talking about tailoring. So when Oswald went to Savile Row, for starters, Savile Row was dying. People started to care less about Savile Row. There wasn't the same buzz or energy around Savile Row anymore. And what Oswald Boateng managed to achieve was he managed to reintroduce a new generation to what Savile Row tailoring is. And also, he also changed people's ideas of Savile Row because if you go to Savile Row now, there are different tailors that offer very, very different aesthetics. If you went to Savile Row during Oswald Boateng's time, everyone had this idea that this is how we do British tailoring. This is what British tailoring looks like. If you do any other type of tailoring that's not British, and we don't care. And what Oswald Boateng basically did was middle finger to all of you. I don't care. I'm going to modernize British tailoring and show a different aesthetic. And that's why the lapels are really tiny. They're really skinny. They're in unusual colors. And now, because of Oswald Boateng, which they don't give him credit for, yes, now other tailors have joined Savile Row and offer different looks. And other tailors that are on Savile Row have started to differentiate themselves from the other tailors so that they offer their own unique aesthetic. And Oswald Boateng is a big reason for this. And also a big reason why a new generation was reintroduced to what Savile Row tailoring can be because of his runway shows and his time at Givenchy. And I just think Oswald just does not get the credit that he deserves for doing all of that. Like the amount of hate that Oswald got when Oswald was doing those collections at first, the way, if you read like the articles back then, they're like, this is not even British tailoring, this is a joke. It's hilarious because a lot of those tailors now have even gone further to try and differentiate themselves from other tailors, which to me is absolutely hilarious. I always find it hilarious when people are like so hateful towards change and then they follow suit after like that change has been cemented. It's hilarious. Savile Row is typical elitist, traditionalist, British snobbery. Yeah, it is, to be fair, for the most part. I can't wait for your Oswald Boateng video. Yeah, I think it's just so needed. Because, yeah, we just don't talk about Oswald Boateng, which I get it. I get why we don't. Tailoring is not really, especially Savile Row kind of tailoring, is not really something that is talked about in these kind of spaces. There's a side of fashion YouTube and there's a side of just fashion that's all about menswear. These are the kind of people that go to like Pitti Uomo trade fairs. These are the kind of people that like wear suits to these trade fairs. And there's a guy on Instagram. His name is Permanent Style. Definitely check him out. But he's an example of someone that's in the realm of like menswear, tailoring, brogues, that sort of aesthetic and fashion. And they talk about the impact of all different types of tailors, whether we're talking about tailors in Italy, tailors in the UK, like all that sort of stuff. So because I watch these people, I hear about these tailors all the time and I hear about different tailors and I know how Savile Row has shifted over time because these are the people that go to Savile Row all the time, interview the tailors at the Savile Row boutiques. But in this side of fashion that I mainly talk about and like I can imagine the type of people that watch my channel, I can understand that these people don't really care about tailoring too much and wouldn't even know who Permanent Style was, for example. Yeah, Kirby Allison is another good example. Like I'm subscribed to Kirby Allison. That's a really good example. Like Kirby Allison is quite interesting. Kirby Allison like obviously goes to Savile Row and like different tailors, but Kirby Allison also it reviews like cigars. It's like the lifestyle around it also. It's really interesting. Yeah, we have moved on from Peter Doe and Helmut Lang. But yeah, I think in general, it was a good first look at Helmut Lang. But I just want to see Peter Doe do more. But I'm not going to penalize Peter Doe for not doing more for all of the reasons that I have mentioned earlier in the live. But yeah,